So I've been playing Icarus co-op with a friend for about 120 hours at this point. We had started out with one of the easy prospects and realized that it was kind of difficult, and we wanted to see if we could find something a little more relaxing that we could play to get our feet under us on the game, figure it out, level up a little bit more, do some crafting. We ended up starting the Argos exploration, which is a prospect that lasts for 30 days and you basically can do whatever you want. That was, for us, that was a really good place to start off because it allowed us to, like I mentioned, level up, play around with a lot of the crafting things. We kind of sunk into roles based on what we enjoy in games like this. For me, I'm a builder, so I really leaned into the building part of this, and that's where I spent my early talent points was building and some basics. And my friend is more of kind of the explorer hunter, so he went really far down like the bow talent tree, and the text points that he spent were more on crafting the tools and weapons. So it worked out pretty well for us in our case, because we've got a little bit of overlap of common things, but then we are able to kind of play a role in this, which with the limitations on the talent points specifically, I think we are benefiting from the fact that we're playing co-op and we have slightly different interests when it comes to survival building games. So beyond kind of leveling in Argos to get to figure out how the game even works, I'll show my tech tree and my talent tree, but like I mentioned, I'm kind of playing a role or a class, whatever you want to call it, and what I selected may not apply to you depending on how you want to play the game. But I just wanted to kind of show what I picked, explain some things that I would not put points in if I could re-roll these trees, and then go from there. So tier 1, I went with a lot of these. This makes sense. My buddy ended up picking the Firewhacker, so I haven't put a point into that yet, but basically just, this is just the bare minimum of things that you're going to want. I probably wouldn't put a point in the oxidizer, that we really haven't used that. I think everything else here so far has been worth it. Building upgrade tool, I'm not sure I'd bother with that. Haven't really used that much. I would not, I'm sure people would disagree with me, but I wouldn't put any points in thatch. As far as I'm concerned, thatch is completely worthless. Wood is slightly better. I think it's a good temporary place to start when you need shelter, but it's very volatile. I mean, heavy winds will do damage to it. Lightning can burn it down. If you're holding a torch near it, you can burn it down. It's just, I would only count on wood buildings as a temporary thing. But again, I'm sure plenty of people would disagree with me on that. We basically will build a 2x2 wood building to just get our feet underneath us on a new prospect, and then quickly try to move on to stone, depending on the type of prospect. I mean, if you're doing basically a short prospect and you're just kind of running from place to place, you may only care about wood, to just throw up a wood building and tear it down and run off. So anyway, that's that. Here, again, it's a lot of basics. I'll talk about some of the stuff a little more later, but pretty much all of these, we haven't really made many wall torches. That was one of the things, some of the stuff I'll point out that I put points in while we were doing Argos, basically just to mess around with it, because we had crafted quite a bit and made it quite a ways through the tiers of crafting stuff. So some of the points I spent were mostly just to play around with stuff. Wall torch being one of them. until iron is a little more widely available, like a lot of maps you're pretty short on iron, so spending 8 iron for a wall torch just doesn't make sense in most cases. But Icebox is super useful if you have access to a winter biome with ice, which we do on this map once it draws. We're able to go in here and get some ice and bolt before we aggro polar bears, usually. Although that yesterday when we started this, we did end up aggroing a polar bear, and that was a whole thing. Anyway, Rain Reservoir. This thing is one of the first things you want to get built once you've got some leather. This is highly useful. The same thing with the Oxite Dissolver. This is super useful, and you're going to want to put points in. This water skin is completely useless. It leaks so bad that we don't even bother with it anymore. But the oxygen bladder is definitely useful, so you kind of have to go through that to get to something that's useful. This, we basically make sure we have 2 of these per person, so that if we're going to go exploring, you've got one in your oxygen slot, and then you've got one with you, because these don't. We did build up to the next tier of this, which I'll talk about a little later. But anyway, yeah, these are highly useful as opposed to just putting oxide in your oxygen slot. Oxite's heavy, you burn through it way quicker. This is a significantly more efficient use of oxide when you get this, and it's fairly cheap to get up and running pretty quickly. Another thing we always build is a fireplace. This we kind of start with when we're in our little 2x2 wood building, which I'll go show you. We're kind of just at the stone point here. This was the building we started with. And all that stuff you saw in that other building was just jammed in here. Like, there was almost no floor space. We just used this for as little time as possible, just because you can't count on these. If you go exploring and there's a storm and you come back, this will likely be rubble on the ground. So yeah, where was I? Yeah. The rest of this stuff, I mean, this is some things you'll get in later with steel. This was some of the points that we kind of overlap. My buddy was generally kind of making some of this, but if I'm playing solo, some of these things are a little more important to have. Like, I put a point into the Anvil bench, even though he had it, just so that I could do some of this stuff if I'm solo, because sometimes I'll play and I'll gather and do some building without him around. But for the most part, it's us playing. So the Carpentry Bench is used to make what is it, finish wood, I think, which is used for some other things. I had put points into this stuff when we were doing Argos, just to see what it was, play around with it. However, we don't actually use any of this. This is kind of a waste of points at this stage in this game. You can make chairs, but you can't sit in them. These wooden hedgehogs, you'd have to make so many of them for it to be valuable that it's just not worth it with 60 wood and 4 ropes. I mean, if you had a lot of time, maybe those are worth it. The signs, I've noticed, what you type on the sign doesn't even persist from session to session, so those are pretty pointless. And then there's the stone building pieces. We're using the crap out of this stuff. Stone, so far, I mean, aside from aggressive animals attacking it, we haven't seen it degrade from weather, so it's really nice to have stone. We basically sprint to this as soon as possible. Tier 3 stuff, let's see. This is one of the things, the basic wall light, one of the things that we had gotten far enough down the crafting that we were messing around with the biofuel stuff and a generator, and I wanted to see how it worked with attaching a wall light to electricity. But in the timed prospects, there's no reason to even bother with some of this stuff. Concrete furnace is good if you want to progress past iron tools. The original, where is it? The original furnace. Yeah, this guy. It can only smelt iron and copper, which kind of gets you onto the next stuff. If you want to go beyond that, then you got to go with the concrete furnace. Binoculars were something we did in Argos because we were so far down the tree. We were able to kind of play around with some of that kind of stuff. Thermoses, the hot drinks you can make with a thermos are super expensive. Even if you're farming, you know, it takes like 50 coffee to make one of these, and the thermos itself is a decent water container. Like it acts like a canteen if you don't use it to make hot drinks. Canteen is super useful. You got to have steel to get to it, so that's where you got to, you know, jump up to the concrete furnace. So, well, yeah, I think you need that to make to cook the steel bloom. Anyway, the making hot drinks with the thermos is a cool idea, but once you make, say you have 50 coffee beans, you make a coffee, it switches from the multi-use thermos to just a one-use hot coffee, and you get a buff from it, and then it's empty. And it just seems like way more work than those are worth. Like I could see it, you know, if you're going to use 50 coffee to make one, make it a multi-drink thing. Make it, you know, so it lasts at least, you know, 4 or 6 drinks instead of just one. But kind of digressing there. This is the upgrade to the wood and leather Oxite Dissolvers. These tanks last forever. If you're able to get to this stuff, it's great to have these, just quality of life. Again, the biofuel stuff we got into, I'm not sure you're gonna really need to get to that on most of these shorter prospects. The bolt action rifle was one that we ended up going with to kind of defend against bears, polar bears specifically. Glass working bench is mostly unnecessary unless you're in a much longer prospect. The rest of this, I haven't put points into any of the stuff beyond stone because stone works really well, and without a big, you know, a Valheim-like world with an endless prospect or outpost, whatever you want to call it, there's absolutely no need to put points into this stuff. It's just completely unnecessary, which is why I'm sitting on 51 points right now. If they end up putting a Valheim-like map into Icarus where you've got all the biomes, aggressive animals, and it's just a massive map with tons of caves, I would put points into this stuff and start playing around with building with these. But with the current state of the game, it's just I'm not gonna. Yeah, it's just unnecessary. Flashlight's one of the things we played around with in Argos, but it's, you know, you're not going to get to that in most of these shorter prospects. Same with a hunting rifle. This was us playing around in Argos. I wanted to kind of plug in some of the electronics, see how that worked. And that's really all we've gotten to there. Again, with talents, me being a builder, I put a bunch of points into just inventory weight type stuff. Increased base health and running. Food decay slower, buffs persist longer. This was a complete waste of points on that. Again, I'm sitting on 10 points here just because I'm not sure what I want to put them into yet. And talent points are so limited that you really want to pay attention to where you're putting this stuff. As the builder, again, I went down the pickaxe tree, put some into the hardy axes. Stone buildables costing less to craft. I'll probably end up putting points into this one because we have noticed in these prospects that it makes sense for us to actually carry some stone pieces around so we can kind of throw up a quick 1x2 stone building to sleep and have a campfire inside. So that's probably going to be useful. I haven't really noticed anything else in these trees that would ease a pain point that we've run into. Again, that's why I'm kind of sitting on some points because these are so limited. So, yeah. That's kind of that. Now, as far as like stuff to start out with, first things we try to build is, we've got our 4x4 wood hut that we know is going to be temporary. We had all the stuff was jammed in there. I just got this built up for this prospect we're in now. And, I kind of talked through some of this stuff, but with the two of us, we got a bed for each of us so we can sleep through the night. You have a fireplace. This is nice just because of the extra space you get, and if you're in a wood building, it's not going to burn it down. At least we haven't had issues with that yet. I can't imagine that's an issue. The crafting bench is going to get you a lot of your starting items that I talked about earlier. The Oxite Dissolver is super important, and having a couple of these per person so that you can swap them out. This is way better to have those than just putting oxide in this oxygen slot for just efficiency of using the oxide in addition to it being significantly lighter. And again, I mentioned the stone furnace. That's going to get you your starting with iron and copper smelting. The textiles bench to get your leather and your fur armor. Very useful depending on what you got to do. And then Anvil to make nails initially, and some iron tools is usually what we'll start out with. And then the masonry bench, obviously, to build out the stone. That's really the main stuff that is, I think, important to start out with. Another thing that we'll probably end up putting out is the Icebox, which, where is that? This thing. That is super useful in storing food for a little bit longer. It significantly slows down the deterioration of it, but it only is going to be useful if you have access to snow, which we're pretty close to the snow section, so we'll be able to go grab ice, which we actually did when we first put this out. You basically want to get this out as soon as possible and hope for a rain so it'll fill it up. Otherwise, you can go grab ice and toss it in here, and it will slowly melt and fill it up. As far as like tools and weapons, the first thing we try to get to are the bone knife after you start killing some things, because with a bone knife you get more fur and leather, and then a longbow just as a little bit better offense, especially if you're starting to go into caves more. A longbow is better to kill those worms with. And then just some other random things. Pay attention to the food buffs that you can get. There's actually some great cooking recipes that you can build up to that just give massive amounts of health and stamina, and it can make a big difference. And we have noticed in prospects that some of them are missing food ingredients. So like the last one we did was the ice storm, and there was no, it didn't have corn. It was hard to find fish. You had to go way up north to get fish. So we didn't end up building any of the cooking crafting tables because we couldn't make hardly anything out of them. I think my buddy ended up making flatbread. That was one of the main things we kind of stuck with. But there's a ton of food options. I think we benefited a lot from our original Argos exploration, just crafting through as much as we could get through. And then when we decided we were at a good spot, we left that and then started more. But that helped us get an idea of the foods you can make, and how beneficial they are, and learning how useful the Oxite Dissolvers are, and how useful the Icebox is, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, food. Making antibiotics is a good thing, especially if you're going into caves a lot, because you get pneumonia, and that debuff is terrible and lasts like 600 seconds. So having antibiotics to get rid of that is nice. The pills are really nice because they last for a few minutes, versus the potion, I think, will just get rid of the buff. So if you're like leaving the cave and you have the buff, you can take the potion, it gets rid of it. However, if you get it while you're in a cave, you can take a pill, and I don't remember how many minutes it lasts, but then it just keeps you from getting it, and then you're not stuck with it while you're in the cave trying to mine.